Welcome to Pop Chat. My name is Annette Tarpley. I'm the host as well as the founder of the Passion of Poetry, and very happy to have with me tonight Tim Seibles. Hey, Tim.
Hello, Annette.
We finally made it, y'all. You have no idea. We have spent 45 minutes with technical difficulties trying everything. And finally, we decided to use his phone versus his computer, and voila. Before he couldn't hear me, that would have made for a very good conversation, I don't suppose. So welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you. You are a former poet laureate for the state of Virginia.
That is correct.
What years were those that you
That was
served?
2016 to 2018.
Okay, great. So just before COVID, right?
Yep, just before.
Mm,
Just
just
before it
before.
all went kind of badly. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were the first African American male for Virginia.
Yes, the first African American male poet laureate. Before me, I believe the first black poet laureate was Rita Dove, I believe. Of-
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've heard of Rita before. I'd love to have her on. Well, we do have one comment already. It's probably something like you finally made it. Good evening, and Tim. So that was Ty who tried to help me. So Ty, what we did was we had him hook up to his phone. So here we are. But what I usually do is I don't read usually the bio. I usually give the screen to you and have you introduce yourself and then divulge what it is that you would like us to know about you. Is that okay with you?
Sure, of course.
And so I'm going to do that. Introduce yourself for us.
All right. Yeah, my name is Tim Seibles. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Uh, I was a creative writing professor for 25 years at Old Dominion University. Um, I've got, I guess, 7 or 8 books out and working on the next book now. I'm just now putting those poems in order. I was a finalist for the National Book Award in 2012. I won the Theodore Rutke Prize in 2013. Um, those are some things about me. I have any number of poets that I love that have influenced what I think about poems. My first teachers were two gentlemen by the name of one named Jack Myers, the late Jack Myers, and the other was Michael Ryan, who is still alive and with us, as far as I know, in California. And I also studied with John Scoyles as an undergraduate. And these were some people who had a very big impact on the way I think about poems. Beyond that, I mean, I could ramble on, I suppose, but why not? Why not just roll on?
We'll roll on. We'll roll on. So I'm actually very excited to hear some of your work. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a piece with us, and do you have a piece that you would consider, Tim, to be your signature piece?
I would that would be a hard one to call, but I have some poems that I
Mhm.
like to read. But
Okay,
I,
great. So
I
nothing specific. You just yeah, gotcha. You have some favorites, maybe.
yeah, I have some poems that I enjoy reading. Let me see.
I'm going to give the screen back to you, and you can just go ahead and do your thing. Have you also done some like spoken word type stuff where you get up and go
I
to like these
am
kind of
not a spoken word artist. No, what you saw, those shots of me with the bass player, those are written poems. I'm reading, and we work out the compositions. I'm reading and he's playing, but no, I don't have the just say it off the top of your head thing. I don't, I don't have.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
that's
but
really
I,
cool that
but
you
I
put
admire
music.
it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's really good that you put it to music though. That's cool.
Yeah. That's something. That's one aspect of my poet life. But mostly I read like this with just my voice. But I love what happens when you can combine some poetry with music. If it works, it can be really nice.
It
But
can.
yeah, no, I've never been a spoken word artist. I think I was probably just a little too old when that happened. My life
Yeah.
poet had already been established. I wasn't. I wasn't particularly interested in being a spoken word poet. I love to read aloud, but I wasn't into
Right.
the theatrics necessarily that were more maybe connected to spoken word. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm anxious to hear you, so go.
Anyway, I'll start with some older poems. Why not? Or I'll just read a poem. I'm just going to read one.
You can read more than one. If you want to read two or three, that's fine.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
I'll do then. And this is a poem I wrote uh, many years ago, actually. So I'll read this. This is one of my early poems. It's a poem called Who, and I wrote it for the Lewitsky Dance Company because I so loved watching them dance, and I also got to watch them rehearse. So this is just called Who. Who doesn't want to dance? To be inside the body, not somewhere beside it. To feel the arms and legs hot and clean in a clear lake of air, like fins, as though every limb were a fish for a moment, free of the water, out of the world. The body, strange as a planet, reeling in its own soft sparkle. Who doesn't want to dance, to let the body go gracefully mad, to fall into the music as though from a cliff, every muscle a feather, every three feathers a bird, every bird bald, blind, and falling, as though the fall itself were the dance, as if the music were a wind holding you up, as though in motion the body is a leaf, is a new fabric, better than feathers, better than water. Who doesn't want to remember the feet, to wash them in music, to feel gravity's tireless kiss, bringing you back, pulling you in, as if there were only you and the earth, and music were the sea, and the body were a small ship with lungs as it sails, as though breathing were dancing, and dancing were living, and living were enough. Who doesn't want to dance?
That's beautiful. I love that.
Well, thank you. It was. I love. I love dance, and I have taken dance classes myself. In fact, but I really love it. And here's a poem in a kind of a different mood. This is a poem a little later in my writing life. It's just called Born. Born. Is this how it begins? A cry that does not know who's crying. Consciousness filling your head like smoke. The brain, a burning house. First surge of self as a thing apart. Scorched. The shock of touch, smell, and somehow hunger. The need to have, sorry, the need to have what you cannot have without help. The unintentional world, wayward, aloof, then maybe relief in someone's arms. Is this where your heart rises, then tilts between hunger and the moment you are fed? The mind sprung by want, your mouth, the first taste, the forgetting where you are and what's to come.
It's beautiful.
Thank
Beautiful. Go ahead and read another one, then we'll chat after.
I will. I'll read you. Hmm, I'll read. Maybe. I'll read this poem. There's another poem from earlier, just a simple poem of desire. It's called The Snail. Sisters, I am weak of your kisses, the wanting of them, the scheming for them, even now with the sun out, even now as I say it, even now while the world warms in the sky's wide mouth. I am broken for the lack of kisses. I am bereaved of all the tongues shut away in the black moonlessness behind teeth, behind smiles, behind faces bruised with unspent desire. What are we doing so far apart? How many times has evening come in like a woman and found me kissless as a snail? How many hours have I bullied the silence, talking about lips, about the way a good kiss spills into every untouched crevice of the brain, talking till my own ears bled of the words, and the sun rose again, only to find me, the same mad snail, talking through the frost on my window, to the nubby grass, to the squirrels, the paperboy, to all of America, talking about the wasted night and the nights that will be wasted while I'm drowning in the kisses. The way everyone is drowning in that hot river of kisses. Never tasted, never tried.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, I've written about kisses myself before. When I was on dating sites, I'd put bad kissers need not apply.
There you go. There you go.
Just saying, it takes two to make the magic happen, but
Oh, yeah.
mm,
If you
so
don't kiss, you deserve no kisses.
it is an art form. It's an art form. But thank you for that. That was a good one. I like
Oh,
that a lot.
those are, yeah, those are older poems mostly. Those, the first and the third one are from my first book, and the other one was from a little later.
Yeah, it's very good. You live by the beach?
I don't live by the beach. I live in Norfolk. I'm about 20 miles from Virginia Beach.
Oh,
Uh,
that's
I
nice.
do live on the river. I live on the Elizabeth River. I'm looking at the river right now. Actually, it's just
Right. That's right. I remember you telling me that because you said that there were dolphins. Saw dolphins in the river.
yeah. It's, as I said, it's been a while now. But one time I was out there, and there was about
Yeah,
20 of them just jumping around out there clowning. Because
that
it's
is,
not a freshwater river; it's a brackish river. So I guess they don't mind if, as long as it's salt in the water. I guess they'll go anywhere.
yeah. So that brings to a question that sometimes I ask. So, if you could be an animal, what animal would you be?
That's a good question. There's so many animals that I admire. Um, Maybe I'd be a dragonfly, or do you mean an animal like a mammal?
You
I'm
can be whatever you want.
sure.
With something,
Yeah, maybe a
yeah,
dragonfly. I really like the way they move and the way they fly and their crazy wings and their big eyes. I really like that about them. But
the
I,
only thing
I
is,
love.
what's their longevity? What's their longevity? That you probably don't live very long.
No, I don't think they last too long, but I was just thinking about, if you're a dragonfly, you don't worry about it. You just be a dragonfly.
That's right. That's right. That's my children's book was called "The Bird and the Dragonflies." So
Uh,
yeah. Um, so is there anything that you would you would recommend to people who want to get into writing? As
in any book or just any idea?
like let's say someone reads poetry and they think, "Wow, I'd really like to do that." How do I start writing poetry? What do I do?
Well, probably the most important thing to do would be to read a lot of poets. When you read other people, they give you both ideas about what's possible, but also they give you ideas about how one makes a poem. I had a number of good teachers in workshops, but probably my most important teachers were the books I loved, the poems that I loved, because the poems that you really like or the poets that you like really make you want to write like them. So of course initially you imitate, and which is how you learn. That's how we learned how to speak in the first place. We imitated what we heard our parents saying. And so established poets are like our parents. They teach us how to speak. And so that's the most important thing. But if you're thinking in practical terms, there's a book called The Poet's Companion. It's a book called The Poet's Companion. It's edited by two wonderful poets, Dorian Lux and Kim Adenizio. You probably know these poets. Anyway, I love that book. It gives you both very exacting ideas about craft, but it also gives you a number of exercises to play with. And I think early on, exercises can be really helpful because sometimes um, beginning writers sometimes struggle for subject matter or struggle to begin a poem. And
Yeah.
this book, they give you these exercises and away you go. You're just in there. So that's a book that I would take on if I was serious about starting a writing life.
Wow. Yeah. Good advice. Good advice. Kim and I had this conversation. She was on the other day.
Oh yeah, I love her.
Kim Miller.
Oh, I thought you meant Kim Adenizio. Sorry, I didn't.
No, no, she was on, and she we both have this thing, and it's our own thing, where we sit, and I do encourage people to read, um, to poets to get into that way. But for me, when I came into the poetry world, I didn't want to do that. At least at first, I wanted to limit my exposure because I didn't want to take on someone else's style. You know
Uh,
what I mean? um, and she voiced the same thing that she did. I think once you kind of get past that, you kind of find your own path, then you can really start, for us. For other people, that might not be it, but I think that we both kind of felt that same way, where we just wanted to kind of forge our way first, and then
yeah,
you know
whatever works. I mean,
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
matter how you get there, as long as
yeah,
you, you know, if I loved reading people and listening to other people and stuff.
yeah.
Big
No,
up,
I love it now
but
because my exposure is huge because I
yeah,
listen to people
yeah,
all the time.
right. But I mean,
Yeah,
on that was a big deal to me. But if you can get there another way, the whole point is just to get there. It doesn't matter how.
yeah,
If
yeah,
you can start alone and not read anything, and you can get started, then do that. Do that.
yeah. And I think now when you write a piece, like for instance, those pieces, how long do you think that it took you to write those?
Well, they're all different. I was a much younger writer for as I said, the first and the third. I imagine they would take me, oh gosh, probably those pieces, 8 or 9 drafts, maybe, which would be more like probably over the period of 10 to 15 days. I don't very rarely will I sit down and go draft in the same day. I'll just do a draft, come back, try another one, maybe let it sit for a day or two, try another one. So those would be probably 8, 9 drafts, I suppose. As I've gotten older, of course, I guess your expectations get higher because you know more about poetry. So it takes me more time now, probably, to write than it did when I was younger, because I'm trying to do more with the poem.
Yeah,
So that's, but some poems have taken me a year to finish, uh,
yeah,
but it's not writing every day on the same poem. You write, and you sit it down for a couple of weeks and before you go back to it. So, I mean, however it works, whatever allows you to get it as close to how you imagine it should be, whatever time that takes, that's what it takes. It's
Yeah.
whatever. I don't want to leave something when I feel it could be better. I always want to try and push it till I maximize, or I think I've maximized what's possible in that piece.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though how everyone, approaches that and they execute it because it's very different. Like me, I spit it out. I'm done. I'll look it over a couple times and it's all done in 20 minutes.
Mm.
So and that might have to do with the quality of it. Maybe my quality would be better if I molded over for a while. Who knows?
Whatever works,
Uh,
man. So I can.
Yeah, but it's interesting because there's some people like you that are very methodical. I know a lot of writers that are like that and they'll mull over it. There's some times where I'll take something and put it on the back burner and just not film it all the way and then come back to it later. And I think do you have those poems where you start going down one road and then you're going down, you take a detour, you're going down another one? As
Occasionally, at home I'll see something that makes me feel that my original impulse was wrong, and then I'll try and take the poem or let the poem take me in another direction. But generally speaking, if I've been working on something for a while, usually that means I have a pretty good sense of what's trying to take shape.
yeah,
But early on, sometimes I'll think, oh, this is going to be a funny poem. And then suddenly I realize, oh, this is not going to be a funny poem. It's going to be a heavy poem.
yeah.
Sometimes the reverse. Sometimes a poem that starts out seriously becomes really crazy. So, yeah.
You have very long fingers. You have piano fingers and noticing it.
They are long. My fingers
Now,
are.
then
uh,
do this with your pinkies. Do this with your pinkies. Straighten them out. Does one of them curl a little bit?
yeah, this one I broke this joint.
How
So
about
that's
the
why I
other one?
like that.
The other one has a little curve
Yeah,
here.
this one is just naturally curved that way, but this bend right there is because I broke.
We might be related. That's actually a genetic thing.
See, you never
Um,
know.
my mom I have them just on my pinkies, but my mother had them on all of her fingers.
Uh,
No, it was like a shortening of the tendon. So I don't know. We could be related. Never know.
never know.
So, the message is from Ty, who says, "Love the third, especially the first one." And and then he said, "What is the name of your books? Is it on Amazon?" Also, the names of his books was in the intro video. Ty, is it?
Right. And
Yeah,
if you go to Tim at timseibles.com,
right.
you can find all the books, the titles of all the books,
Yeah,
and also ways of purchasing them. They're usually either from Amazon or from the press. So,
yeah.
but that's all on the website.
And I'll send you Ty later on. I'll send you his advertisement thing that had his website address on there. And your fingers are perfect for a bass guitar, he says.
I play guitar, but not bass, though I admire bass players.
Very good, very good. Is there any kind of talent that you wish you had that you don't?
Um, it's funny that you ask. I don't. I always think that anything I work at, I could be pretty good at. But one talent I don't have, but truthfully, I don't necessarily wish I had it. Is I'm not particularly good at drawing and stuff, but I don't think about it. I don't necessarily care about drawing, but I admire it in other people. But it's not something I crave. I tell you what I do wish though. I wish I could play the oboe. I wish I could play the viola. I wish I could play. I wish I could play the bass. Those are things that I really love. But I figured once I became interested in guitar years ago, I figured I better focus. I wasn't going to be someone who could be a multi-instrumentalist. So I thought, I love guitar. I love Hendrix. I love Santana. I love Al Di Meola. I love Django Reinhardt. There's so many people that I admire that are guitar players. I thought, well, I'll try to find my own sense of what the guitar can do. But if I had 2 or 3 lives to live, I would love to be a bass player. I love the bass.
It's never too late, right?
Well, sometimes it might be.
Just kind of depends on your perspective, right? Right. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to go to you recite maybe three more of your poems or four
Sure.
more. And this is something I ask everyone who's on here, and that is tomorrow you come across Aladdin's lamp and you are granted three wishes, and you can wish for anything you want. What would you wish for?
Um, that's a really interesting question. I would, I mean, I'm gonna swing pretty big here. I would wish for a world that was at peace with everybody with nice houses and full bellies. That'd be my first wish. My second wish would be that everybody got to live to be really old, but healthy old, not old and feeble and losing their minds, but just healthy and old. Like they lived to be like 100, but you were pretty solid all those years. Maybe you couldn't run fast, but your mind was good and you got to reflect on your life all over all those years. That'd be my second wish. And my third wish, maybe I should do one thing that's really just for me. My third wish would be to be able to speak every language, to be fluent in every language. So wherever I went, I could speak to the people in the language that was their born language. That I would love to do.
That's
Those
a,
are
those are great wishes. All great wishes. You just spit those out. You didn't have a hard time with those.
no.
Um,
Think about what I wish for all the time.
yeah. No, you did good. You did good. So I'm going to give the stage back to you, and I want you to go ahead and read us three more of your pieces. We'd love to hear more
All
of
right.
your wonderful work.
I'll read some things that are later in my writing life. All right. Okay. All right. How about this? I don't want to read anything that's too long. That would not be good. All right. Here's a good one. I love the villanelle form, and I've developed what I call the blues villanelle, and this is one of them. This is called the 30-30 blues villanelle. Who can tell a man not to go where he goes? I laid the long tracks. My life waves from the train. I was 30 almost 30 years ago. Being grown up means you're supposed to know, although I don't know what I can explain. And I was 30, like 30 years ago. I've been with the music, breaking hard but slow. Jobs kidnap the daylight, then leave the remains. Just kiss me goodbye when it's time to go. It looks like we're losing, but say it ain't so. Dumb news and new killers get most of the fame. Why tell a man not to run when he goes? My dad's on a walker, his whole life in tow. If you'd seen him at 40, you'd say, what a shame. But he was 40 almost 50 years ago. Sanity works hard to put on the good show, but still some fine folks go off in the brain. They couldn't know that they didn't know. Why needle a riddle when the answer is no? Been poking the troubles, but the trouble remains. And I've been 30 since 30 years ago. I look at young men and think, where did I go? Play some guitar while death tunes my name. Guess this is the what I should already know, 'cause I was 30 years ago.
Love that.
Thank you. All right. I'll read you something. Something else in a different vibe. All right, how about this? This is a poem called The Dollars. Just called The Dollars. It has an epigraph. The epigraph is I'm all in. The dollars. Do they own you? Do they make you do whatever they want? Do they own you? Do you work and pay and work? Are you nervous? Is it hard to sleep? Do they got you? Was it hard to wake up? What about your hair? Does it keep happening? Are you doing your best? Do you need a little something? Are you dressed? Are you getting dressed? Are you almost dressed? What about your hair? Are you tired? Are you hard to wake up? What time is it? How about now? Do they need more? Do they make you? Did they make you over? Are you half dressed? Do they own you? Do you think what you're supposed to? Are you saving? Who are you saving? Are you nervous? Are they watching? Is it hard? Do you ever wake up? Do they own you? Do you wake up when they want you to? Are they everywhere? Are you on time? How about now? How about now? Do you do the work? Did you do the do? Did they do you? Are you trying to get dressed? Are you? Did you? Will you? Do they own you? Do they still own you? And these are all newer pieces. And this is a poem called Something Like We Did. It's the title from which the CD that the bass player and I did, Chris Bridge and I did. It's the title from which the title of the CD comes. Something Like We Did. It has an epigraph by Sun Ra. Some of you know the music of Sun Ra, who was a very crazy man, but brilliant and probably one of the most inventive composers of the 20th century. He has this one piece and he repeats, space is the place. Something like we did. You could tell they were surprised that we tried to build cities the way you and I might be amazed that birds can build nests without hands. They saw how we lived and made a sound like rain sifting a river. For a lot of us, knowing we were not alone brought relief from the headache that had lasted all our lives. Of course, some people were scared. The religious held on to their books, claiming this was all make-believe. Even when it was unmistakable, the 61 ships stacking light in the clouds, emerald green at dawn, lavender in late afternoon, the engines nearly quiet, as if the sky were breathing. They walked something like we did, but the right foot stepped twice for each step of the left. So it appeared they were either testing the ground or considering a dance. Their skin was dark but transparent, their hearts like ours but visible. And when the military began to mobilize, all the big weapons turned into barrels of wine. And whatever we tried with knives or guns, we somehow ended up doing to ourselves until it seemed insane, even to us. Each time one of them spoke, it was like a piano if Cecil Taylor were playing, voices bending the air the way chimney swifts swoop, half turn, fling back. But after a while, when they watched us, their lips shimmered and something long ago closed their eyes, as if we were a memory of who they once had been, and they'd come to Earth to prove their existence and mark the promise of another world, someplace we might actually go if we could see inside ourselves and trace what was there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Makes me wonder when I'm listening to you how you come up with all those thoughts, those processes. Because
Slight madness, that's how I come up.
well, we all have a little bit of cray going on. It's just whether or not you're cray or you're cray cray. So yeah. So what I think that a lot of us, we have those imaginings, right? Got to take them somewhere.
Well,
But so when you taught mostly creative writing.
Well, I
Did,
taught literature and all that, and I taught high school for 10 years too, which was grammar and composition and God knows what all. But yeah, and at the university, they brought me to Old Dominion University to teach creative writing in addition to, literature and the Harlem Renaissance and the philosophy of poetry and any number of other things. But yeah, I spent a lot of time teaching workshops. Yes,
okay, great. So you've taught poetry. You taught it.
I have taught
Um,
many times.
Very good. So how would you define poetry?
Well, I mean, that's a really complicated question.
Is
Uh,
yeah.
the way I would say the easiest way to define poetry would be to differentiate it from prose. So in poetry, the line is meaningful. The line, the way you turn it or break it, matters. It changes the meaning, it can change the rhythm of what is said, and so on. In prose, there isn't that. In prose, you just write margin to margin, and the sentence is the main thing. In poetry, it's the line. The line is a part of of a sentence, but the line itself matters. Now, where it becomes more complicated is when you start talking about prose poetry. Prose poetry also goes margin to margin, so it's very hard to discern the difference between, for example, a prose poem and a flash fiction. Both are short, are written margin to margin. So that becomes a much harder thing to differentiate. Those two things are harder to differentiate. But if we talk generally, prose goes margin to margin and thinking in terms of sentences as the main, building block. And in poems, the line is the probably essential building block.
Do you feel like those definitions are still a bit obscure for most? That they're do you think that it's really concrete as far as poetry and prose and the definitions?
Well, I can show you the difference on a piece of paper. In
Yeah.
poetry, the line breaks and doesn't go to the other margin, and in prose it goes margin to margin. So it's pretty simple.
So, so it is. Okay.
But in terms of does a short story or a flash fiction touch us the way a poem does? And my answer is yeah. I mean, if the writer is lyrical and intends to engage us emotionally, a piece of prose can be easily as moving as a poem. So I think in terms of what they
Mm,
do in our heads and hearts, prose and poetry overlap in lots of ways. How they get there to our hearts and our heads is different. But what happens there, yeah, a story can be extremely moving. And
yeah.
when you start thinking about like the South Americans, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, for example, and you got magical realism, then you're employing some of the gestures that a poet might employ by bending what's real and what's not, and so on. And so there's a lot of overlap in between the genres. For me, truthfully, I don't really care what you call stuff. If it's really good writing and it moves me or makes me think or see something that I couldn't have otherwise, I'm just happy I read it. Call it whatever the hell you want.
I gotcha. Yeah, I gotcha. So, is there anything that you think that we can do? Do you feel like poetry is really taking a back burner in the literary world?
Well, if you think about it in terms of sales, I mean, certainly there are very few books of poems, at least that I'm aware of, that sell 1 million copies. So,
Right.
in terms of sales, yeah, poetry would not be nearly as commonly embraced as a novel, for example.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean its impacts aren't important. I mean, my
Right.
life is different because I read poetry and write poems. It being exposed to poetry and having been lucky enough to read a lot of poems and to sit with poems, other people's as well as my own, it changes the way I've lived. So I
Yeah.
poem can be really powerful. And all the poets that I know, I imagine this is true for you too, and people you know. I mean, if we try to imagine our lives without poetry, it's almost impossible. I mean, the way you
Yeah.
approach your daily life is different because even if you're not doing it consciously, you're subconsciously trying to find the words that might say something in a very specific way, and
Yeah.
it changes the way you pay attention. Poetry, but in terms of the culture and how whether it's influential more or less than prose, I don't really know. All I know is that it matters a great deal to me, and it matters a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, if there are very, at least I know of no poetry books that sold 1 million copies. Um, but I would say also professional sports would probably be more influential than all the arts, in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
people's interest. But I don't think sports really changes our minds very much. It's exciting and they're more fun to watch. I was an athlete. I love sports, but poetry and novels and plays and songs and paintings and dances, they make us rethink what it means to be awake, what it means to be
Yeah.
human. That's to me far more important. Now, as I said, I love sports, and I spent my spare
Mhm.
time on football fields, baseball fields, tennis courts, tracks. But in terms of what I carry in my soul, it would be the arts, poetry in particular because it's my life. But I love the arts in general. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing more important to me than the arts.
Yeah. And I think it's those of us. Do you feel like you get a lot of support within your family as far as your writing and the things you've created?
Well, my mother was an English teacher. My parents are both passed by at this point. My mother was an English teacher, and she read my poems somewhat. But my father, who was a chemist, he read my books cover to cover. It's so interesting to me. But I think, truthfully, he was an artist at heart. He just didn't allow himself to be an artist. But he was very interested in music and poetry, and he would read poems to me. He'd read my poems to me, which I thought was just crazy. But But yeah, they were very kind to me. Now, would they have liked it more if I was a lawyer or an architect? Sure. I mean, they would thought, oh, those are very respectable professions. But the fact that I was a teacher, they thought that's okay. You know, my mom was a teacher. Teachers, all right. Being a professor was pretty cool. But my interest in the arts, because neither of my parents were artists, I don't think they ever quite understood my passion for language and for poetry. I'm not sure they really got it. They just knew I wrote a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think those of us who have that passion too, I think it's we understand each other. You know, when you're a writer and you're a poet, and you understand that thing that's just in you that just has to come out, and just the love of poetry and words and the beauty of it. I guess my thing is I keep trying to figure out other initiatives where we can really get infused into our society.
Mm.
So people buy our books, right?
Sure. And so, I mean, if you're lucky enough to teach, you have a chance to have a direct impact on how students come to poetry.
Yeah,
One of my great sorrows is that I think many people who taught English in elementary school, middle school, and high school, many of them did not love poetry, and they just taught it as something to get through. Let's do a poetry unit, and then you get a B if you understand symbolism. That's not that you can't teach someone to love poetry that way. You have
no,
to just read poems to them and say, "What do you think? How did that land with you?" And let people be with the poems. And I think because poetry's been badly taught, that's why it's harder to get lots of people reading books of poems. They have bad experiences. How many people have I met, and you probably have met them as well, who say, "Oh, I just don't understand poetry. I never got a good grade in school on poetry."
yeah,
Because it shouldn't have been about grades. It should have been about this is what language can do. What do you feel when you hear this? What kinds of thoughts do you have? To invite people into poetry instead of saying, okay, here's a bar you're going to have to jump if you're going to get through poetry. It ruined it for a lot of people. And I think
I
we,
think you're exactly right.
yeah,
You're exactly right.
we
And a
suffer.
lot of people have said that same thing to me that you said, and that is that they don't understand it. And there's so much the amount of different types and styles and of poetry are just immense. And I think sometimes they maybe not have been exposed, and I don't think that they realize they're touched with poetry every day. You know, we
Right.
all are.
Yeah, and they don't. And they that
Yeah,
and that's also because their teachers didn't say, hey, do you like song lyrics? That's related to poetry.
right.
That so you do understand poetry, you know? And I always tell people also, if every time you turned on music, somebody was gonna quiz you on, what was the drum doing? Was the guitar playing an E or G? If you were quizzed every time you heard music, you wouldn't like music that much either. And so that's what happens. Well, the art was ruined in many cases.
Just let him enjoy it. Let him,
Yeah, you
you
enjoy
know.
and and once the interest has been cultivated, then you can start asking more demanding questions like, okay, is this poem working on two levels? Is this an allegory? Is there something in this poem that might be a symbol? But you have to cultivate the interest first. You can't start there because then it just becomes intimidating. And then people think, oh, poetry's hard. I don't understand it. I'm scared. What's iambic pentameter? I don't get it. So you ruin the art for people, which is just heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. I feel ya. I felt that. So why don't you grace us with three more of your pieces, if you would, sir?
Sure. I'll read poems till my head explodes. No, I'm
And
kidding.
shoot.
I will try not to read them till my head explodes. All right. All right. How about here's a quieter poem. Here's a meditative poem, and I may read a wild one after this, but I'll start with this one. It's a poem called Late Shift. Late Shift. Places, maybe dreams, from which I cannot return. The velvet touch of first light fingering a cup. Sacred dislocations of mind. The way the right sound becomes visible. Where I am now, it's later. The clocks have been amended to include all the strange hours. And someone cracked my name as if all my life I'd been locked inside. I know the shelves stay stocked. Big cars lead the chase. There's always more and more to eat. But was that ever my country? I was born there, and I'd go back if I could. But what I took to be a certain distance was actually a late shift in myself, a different kind of listening. The voice, a thread of honey, the jar tipped just enough to one side. Listen, we belong to no nation. One day we will hold the earth again as if she'd been a love nearly lost. Her rainy hair tangled in our hands. The soul is what we are. Every life a word the wind turns to say. And though trouble grows back like a beard, an unchained blood governs my tongue. I have seen the door that is not there, still open.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Let me talk to you just because as you're and we'll come back to you reciting,
Sure.
but as you're reciting, what's coming to mind to me is something that I've always kind of preached is the beauty and simplicity. In other words, your words aren't really, huge words or complex, but within the beauty of that simplicity, therein lies the complexity of how you utilize your words and choreograph them in such a way that it really, you're using symbolism, you're using all kinds of different techniques to make it more complex and make people think about what you're writing. So there's this beauty, and out of it, of simplicity, and out of it evolves this loveliness of complexity. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. The poets that I've admired most of my life, I think, worked mostly with language that was very approachable. And what they did with it might have been, asked you to think and feel deeply, but it
Right,
wasn't a vocabulary that overwhelmed
right.
or made you think, oh my God, I got to go to the dictionary. That wasn't the point.
Yeah, well, then I shut down. But I think I've always said that it takes more of a word artist and a wordsmith to take simplistic words and to move and emote people with them, and choreograph them in such a way that you emote something from a person. So the beauty of simplicity, I love it, and but yet it's deep, it's deep, and there's
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah. Pablo Neruda, the great Chilean poet, would talk about writing what he called brotherly verse as opposed to scholarly verse. And he said brotherly verse is the verse that anybody, who could approach. Now, in his time, he thought primarily of brotherly verse, but I imagine he meant just basic people, male and female, but he would call it brotherly verse. And I took a lot to heart from that. I want to write a verse that anyone could read, whether they've studied poetry or not. I don't, I don't want people to need to study poetry before they could hear or read one of my poems. Um, so
Yeah.
you to be approached by anyone. That's how I think about it, and that's why, for the most part, I don't use particularly complex words. Occasionally, there'll be one that might ask you to look it up, but that's pretty rare for me. I'd rather make the complexity be more about what is felt than the vocabulary. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. Love it. Go ahead and do. We're coming towards the end, so do your last two pieces. I don't know if you have a special one you want to end with, but I'm
Uh,
going to give this back to you, sir.
sure. I'll read this. I'll read a wild one, and then I'll read a quieter one. This is a poem called First Kiss, and it's for lips. And this poem is on YouTube. Someone years ago did an animated version of this poem. So if you put First Kiss in my name, you'll get this. It's not a cartoon exactly, but it's a series of images that go along with the poem. And it's my voice reading it, but the display is all these strange images, which is kind of cool. First Kiss. I dedicate it to lips because everyone has lips. Some kind of lips, right? Her mouth fell into my mouth like a summer snow, like a fifth season, like a fresh Eden, like Eden when Eve made God whimper with the liquid tilt of her hips. Her kiss hurt like that. I mean, it was as if she'd mixed the sweat of an angel with the taste of a tangerine. I swear, my mouth had been a helmet forever greased with secrets. My mouth, a dead end street, a little bit lit by teeth. My heart, a clam slammed shut at the bottom of a dark. But her mouth pulled up like a baby blue Cadillac, packed with canaries, driven by a toucan. I swear, those lips said bright wings when we kissed, wild and precise, as if she were teaching a seahorse to speak. Her mouth, so careful, chumming the first vowel from my throat, until my brain was a piano banged loud, hammered like that. It was like, I swear, her tongue was Saturn's seventh moon, hot like that, hot and cold and circling, circling, turning me into a glad planet, sun on one side, night pouring her slow hand over the other, one fire flying the kite of another. Her kiss, I swear, if the great mother rushed open the moon like a gift and you were there to feel your shadow finally unhooked from your wrist, that'd be it. But even sweeter, like a riot of peg-legged priests on pogo sticks, up and up, this way and higher, not falling, but on and on like that, badly behaved, but holy. I swear, that kiss, both lips utterly committed to the world, like a Peace Corps, like a free store, forever and always, a new city, no locks, no walls, just doors. Like that, I swear, like that. This last poem, it's called From Darkness. From darkness. Sunrise runs a fresh wind through the leaves. A night turns back into shadows. Waking up, the birds tell first light everything they know. Why do we keep killing each other? The earth is a woman who walks in the sky, walks in the sky. Her legs so long, you can't even see them. For no reason, the morning comes back again, saying, come back, open your eyes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Both of them. We had two poems on kissing tonight. Well, what do you say
That's
about that?
those kisses in there, right?
So no, they were lovely. Your poetry is beautiful.
We have some fun.
Um,
Annette. Thank you very much.
I really thank you very much for coming on and gracing us with your wonderful poetry.
Yeah.
And
Well,
sorry about the first 45 minutes. We
it's
tried.
probably my fault. I just, there's something about the computer that I don't understand. I've just never had this problem before. But
Yeah,
anyway, I wish we had figured out the phone would work. I wish we'd figured that out sooner. We could have.
sure. Yeah, I know, right? I'll remember that next time.
Yes, next time.
Yeah. But thank you so much. Love and blessings to everyone for
Right.
watching.
Yes, and I hope I'm so grateful for whomever was willing to wait and listen and watch this. It's a really wonderful thing for me, and I really loved it, Annette. Thank you for being interested in me and my poems. I appreciate that.
The pleasure was all mine. So
Okay,
thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching. And please share this with others. Take care. Bye
all
bye.
right, later.